Paris, 1314. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, is tied to a wooden post on a small island in the Seine River. The flames lick at his feet, slowly climbing higher. But here's the thing that'll make your blood run cold. Jacques doesn't die quickly. For 20 agonizing minutes, his screams echo across the water while thousands of Parisians watch like it's the hottest entertainment in town. 20 minutes of pure, calculated agony. And the most disturbing part? This wasn't some barbaric accident. This was French medieval justice at its finest, designed by what I can only describe as the most twisted engineers of human suffering the world has ever seen. Welcome back to the channel, and if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Seriously, 90% of you watching this aren't subscribed, and after what I'm about to show you, you're going to want to stick around for more. Today, we're diving deep into the darkest chapter of medieval France, where the aristocrats didn't just execute people, they turned human suffering into an art form so sophisticated, so psychologically devastating, that even the Catholic Church, the same institution that launched the Crusades, had to step in and say, okay, that's enough. We're talking about torture methods so brutal they were banned across Europe. We're talking about French nobles who literally consulted with physicians to design devices that would keep victims conscious and suffering for months. And we're talking about a justice system that wasn't about rehabilitation or even simple execution. It was pure psychological warfare designed to break the human spirit while keeping the body alive just long enough to send a message that would echo through generations. The medieval French didn't just kill their enemies. They erased them from existence in ways that would make modern horror movie directors quit their jobs and become accountants. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear will change how you think about human nature forever. Let me paint you a picture of medieval France between 1000 and 1500 CE. We're talking about a feudal system where lords had absolute power over life and death, where justice wasn't about right and wrong, it was pure theater designed to demonstrate power. These weren't random acts of cruelty by unhinged madmen. This was calculated psychological warfare, perfected over centuries by people who understood that the real power wasn't in the physical pain. That was just the opening act. The real power was in the complete mental destruction of not just the victim, but everyone who witnessed it. The French perfected what I can only call the art of breaking the human spirit while maintaining consciousness. They understood something that modern psychologists are just beginning to grasp. That trauma doesn't just affect the individual, it ripples through entire communities for generations. Every public execution, every torture session, every scream that echoed through the cobblestone streets was designed to condition an entire population to never, ever challenge authority. But here's where it gets really dark. The French took this concept and ran with it in ways that would make seasoned FBI profilers need therapy. They didn't just want to hurt people. They wanted to create suffering so profound, so systematic, that it would haunt the collective memory of anyone who dared oppose them. Our first stop on this nightmare tour is 1387, and we need to talk about something called the Brazen Bull. Picture this. You're in a medieval French courtyard, and in the center sits what looks like a beautiful bronze sculpture of a bull. It's actually kind of artistic, right? Wrong. This isn't art. It's a prison and an oven rolled into one diabolical paca. Here's how it worked, and I'm warning you now, this is going to mess you up. The victim would be locked inside this bronze bull, and then flames would be lit underneath. As the metal heated up, their skin would literally sizzle against the bronze walls. But here's the part that's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about human creativity. The French installed acoustic pipes inside the bull that would transform the victim's screams into what sounded like realistic bull roars. Let that sink in for a second. While someone was literally being cooked alive inside, the crowd gathered around would hear animal sounds. Families would bring their children to watch. Vendors would sell food. People would laugh and cheer, all while thinking they were just watching some kind of medieval special effect. The human suffering was completely invisible, completely dehumanized. Jean Froissart, a medieval chronicler, documented one of these sessions at Chateau de Vincennes. The temperature inside reached about 300 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cause excruciating burns, but not hot enough for immediate death. Victims could survive up to 6 hours inside, their voices gradually growing weaker until the bull finally went silent. The crowd would cheer when the roaring stopped, having no idea they'd just witnessed one of the most horrific forms of execution ever conceived. The Catholic Church initially endorsed this method as humane because it hid the suffering from public view. But everything changed when Pope Urban VI witnessed one firsthand and realized what was actually happening. He immediately banned the practice across Christian territories, calling it an affront to God's mercy. When the Pope who launched multiple crusades thinks your execution method is too brutal, you know you've crossed a line that shouldn't exist. But the French weren't done. Oh no, Todd. Hey, we're just getting started. Let me tell you about something that happened regularly at Place de Grève in Paris, usually at dawn when the morning light could illuminate every detail for the thousands of spectators who would gather for what was essentially a multi-day festival of human destruction. They called it the Breaking Wheel. And if the Brazen Bull was medieval France's opening act, this was their headlining performance. Picture a wooden wheel, about 6 feet in diameter, lying flat on the ground. The victim would be tied spread eagle across it, arms and legs stretched to the corners. Then came the executioner with an iron hammer, and what happened next was so systematically brutal that it required actual medical knowledge to perform properly. Starting with the fingers, the executioner would methodically break every single bone in the victim's body. Fingers, hands, forearms, upper arms, toes, feet, shins, thighs, each break carefully calculated to shatter the bone without severing major arteries. Because remember, the goal wasn't a quick death. The goal was maximum suffering for maximum duration. Some victims survived up to 9 days on display after their bones were broken, their shattered limbs twisted at impossible angles, slowly dying from exposure, dehydration, and infection, while crowds gathered daily to watch their deterioration like it was appointment television. The executioners had to receive basic training in human anatomy to perform this properly. They learned which bones could be broken without causing immediate death, which sequence would maximize pain while avoiding blood loss, and how to save the femur break for last, because hitting that major bone carried the highest risk of fatal bleeding. The community aspect of this is what really gets me. Families would attend these events as educational opportunities for their children. Vendors set up stalls selling food and drinks. Musicians performed between the bone-breaking sessions. People placed bets on how long the victim would survive. We're talking about crowds of up to 15,000 people. That's larger than most modern concert venues, gathering to watch systematic torture as entertainment. And the seasonal variations? In winter, victims would slowly freeze to death on the wheel. In summer, they'd die of dehydration while insects fed on their open wounds. The French had literally systematized suffering based on weather patterns. But wait, it gets worse. So much worse. In 2019, archaeologists made a discovery at Château de Vincennes that changed everything we thought we knew about medieval French cruelty. They found something that the French called oubliettes, from the word oublier, meaning to forget. These weren't just prison cells. They were bottle-shaped chambers carved directly into the bedrock beneath the castle. Picture a hole in the ground about 15 feet deep, just barely wide enough at the bottom for a person to lie down, but too narrow to stand up. The walls curved inward, making it impossible to climb out even if you had superhuman strength. Here's what makes this discovery so chilling. These weren't designed for quick execution. The French had installed drainage holes to prevent victims from drowning quickly when water seeped in. Bone analysis from the archaeological dig revealed that people survived in these chambers for months, showing signs of severe malnutrition, broken bones that had partially healed, and other injuries that proved they lived through extended captivity in conditions that would break most people psychologically within days. The concept was diabolical in its simplicity. Political enemies weren't just executed, they were literally erased from existence. While nobles dined and entertained guests in the great halls above, human beings were slowly dying in chambers carved into the rock beneath their feet. The victims weren't just forgotten by society, they were forgotten while technically still alive, existing in a liminal space between life and death that the French had engineered specifically to maximize psychological torment. Historical records suggest that hundreds of political prisoners disappeared into these oubliettes during the 1400s. Families would search for missing relatives who had simply vanished from existence, never knowing that their loved ones were dying slowly in chambers designed to erase them from human memory. The cruelest discovery? Some of these chambers contained paired skeletons, meaning the French would sometimes throw multiple people into the same oubliette, forcing them to watch each other die over the course of months while sharing the same impossible space. But even after everything I've told you, we haven't reached the bottom of medieval French creativity. There was one method so horrific that even experienced executioners refused to perform it. French nobles had to import specialists from other countries just to operate what they called the Judas cradle, which I can only describe as the absolute pinnacle of human cruelty. Picture a pyramid-shaped wooden seat, sharpened to a point at the top. The victim would be positioned over this point and slowly lowered using a rope system, with the sharp pyramid gradually penetrating their body. But here's the part that separates this from simple impalement. French physicians were consulted in the design to ensure the pyramid would avoid major organs while causing unbearable agony, maximizing the duration of consciousness and suffering. The psychological element was just as calculated as the physical torture. Victims were positioned facing other prisoners who would be forced to watch, knowing their turn was coming next. This wasn't just about punishing individuals. It was about breaking entire resistance networks through demonstration of what happened to anyone who opposed French authority. The Catholic Church. Urch's response to the Judas cradle was swift and unprecedented. Pope Alexander IV issued a papal bull in 1260 specifically banning the device, calling it a device of Satan that had no place in Christian lands. This led to the first official regulations on torture under King Louis IX, later known as St. Louis. But here's the twisted irony. These regulations didn't ban torture, they just standardized it in the name of mercy. The French had become so creative in their cruelty that even their attempts at humanitarian reform were just better organization of human suffering. The legacy of medieval French torture methods extends far beyond the Middle Ages. When revolutionaries stormed the Bastille in 1789, they discovered torture chambers that had been in continuous use for centuries. The guillotine, often criticized as brutal, was actually developed as a humane reaction to the systematic torture that had defined French justice for hundreds of years. The revolutionaries literally chose decapitation as the merciful alternative to what they had been doing to people. This history directly influenced the development of modern international law. The Geneva Conventions, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 5, prohibiting torture. These exist because medieval practices like the ones I've described created a historical record of human cruelty, so extensive that the international community had to formally agree that certain things should never happen to human beings under any circumstances. Each of these torture methods teaches us something different about the capacity for institutional evil. The Brazen Bull showed how societies can dehumanize suffering by making it invisible. The breaking wheel demonstrated how communities can be conditioned to accept cruelty as entertainment. The oubliettes revealed how power corrupts when it includes the ability to make people simply disappear. And the Judas cradle established that there are absolute limits to what can be justified under any legal or religious system. But here's what really keeps me up at night thinking about this research. None of these methods were invented by monsters. They were created by regular people, implemented by regular people, and witnessed by regular people who convinced themselves that what they were seeing was normal, justified, even necessary for social order. The crowds who gathered to watch the breaking wheel weren't evil psychopaths. They were farmers, merchants, craftsmen, and their families who had been conditioned to view systematic torture as community entertainment. The nobles who designed these methods weren't cartoon villains. They were educated, often religious people who genuinely believed they were maintaining social stability through calculated cruelty. This raises a question that I think every person watching this needs to seriously consider. What are we doing right now in our current society that future generations will look back on with the same horror we feel learning about medieval French torture methods? What practices are we normalizing? What suffering are we ignoring? What systems are we participating in that will make people 500 years from now wonder how civilized societies could slip into such barbarism? The medieval French didn't wake up one day and decide to be monsters. They got there through small compromises, gradual normalization of cruelty, and the systematic dehumanization of people they decided didn't deserve full moral consideration. Sound familiar? I want you to think about that, and I want you to leave a comment telling me what current practices you think future generations will condemn with the same intensity we reserve for medieval torture. Because if we can't learn from this history, If we can't recognize the patterns that led regular people to become active participants in systematic cruelty, then we're doomed to repeat it in new forms that we won't even recognize until it's too late. Next week, we're diving even deeper into the dark secrets of French aristocracy with an investigation into the hidden chambers of Versailles that were discovered during renovation work in 2018. What archaeologists found there suggests that the torture methods we discussed today were just the public face of a private system of cruelty that makes everything I've shown you look like amateur hour. If this content has left you questioning everything you thought you knew about human nature and social systems, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because we're just getting started. The rabbit hole of historical human cruelty goes much, much deeper than most people realize, and I promise you that what we uncover next will change how you see the world forever.